we go on. Side with Jesus we go on. Peace in each and every heart that exists. And side by side with Jesus we go on. And side by side with Jesus we go on.
Hi everyone! Welcome to the first class of our Upskill course for Spiritist Educators, Spiritist Education from Mommy's Belly to Adulthood. In this course, we will propose topics to study, to discover, to remember, and to reflect. All about how learning and development take place, from conception to disincarnation. Much is said about the importance of Spiritist education at all ages, babies, children, teens, and adults. But how can we offer quality in a welcoming and motivating environment for all these age groups? We are going to talk a lot about this topic, about how we can putting together the knowledge of the Spiritist doctrine and also the knowledge of theories and methodologies about education. How can we combine these two knowledges to deliver an increasingly wonderful Spiritist education? I am Malu, educator and Spiritist educator for almost 30 years now. Throughout these years, I have performed several roles within schools, from babies to adults, educators, to school coordinator and principal. Besides this experience, I have also worked as a volunteer in Spiritist education with groups of different ages, always with great affection and dedication. And now, with great joy, I am here to share with you my experience. I hope that we can exchange a lot of our experiences and that we can learn from each other, growing together as human beings and also as educators. When we think of our planet Earth, our great school, a thought that always comes to our mind is that nowadays we are living a very delicate and complex moment. When talking to our friends, when watching the news, we get the feeling that humanity is taking steps backwards rather than evolving. And this is a feeling that is not so good, right? As each generation comes to this planet, as each generation is being born, it seems that we do not improve, we do not evolve, that we keep repeating the same mistakes in relation to violence and selfishness, and that these issues have no end. Allan Kardec had this impression too, and he asked the spirituality about this. Question 784 of the Spirit's book states that the perversity of humankind is immense. It seems that human beings are regressing rather than advancing, at least in terms of morality. And the spirits answered the following: you are wrong. Look at the human race as a whole, and you will see that it is advancing. It has arrived at a clearer perception of what is evil and witnesses the reform of some kind of abuse every day. An excess of wickedness is required to show the need for good and the need for reforms. Humanity, through its intelligence, has achieved advances that has never been seen before in the fields of science, the arts, and material well-being. But there is still great progress to be made, according to Kardec in Chapter 8 of the Spirit's book. Humankind needs to understand more deeply about charity, fraternity, and solidarity to ensure moral well-being among us. Here on Earth, we are currently undergoing a transition to a better world. Its habitat has in its genesis a plan where evil supplants good, because we are still very proud and selfish. So, evil ends up prevailing in many moments. In a message from the Gospel according to Spiritism, the Spirit of Truth tells us the following: the time is approaching when the things announced for the transformation of humanity will be fulfilled. And we are living this very moment of transition. We have started to leave behind us the atonements, the trials, and moving towards a world of regeneration. We are living this transformation of the world to the new time. And this moment of transformation needs to have education as the main agent of change, the education of the spirit. And that is why moral education is so important. It helps in the formation of man for this new world, a world that is getting closer to us every day. And our role as Spiritist educators is to prepare the people, the spirits who are arriving for a life involved in the good, involved in love. Of course, we understand this very well. The importance of educating these new people, these new souls that are arriving on the planet. But then comes an extremely important question. We know that education is fundamental, but how to do it? How does the process of spiritually and morally educating someone occur? How can we effectively educate the children, young people, and even adults who come to our Spiritist institution? Is there some magic instruction for us to reach the heart of man? How can we help these new souls become good? In order to reach these and other goals that we set, when we plan our classes at the beginning of the year or perhaps at the end of the previous year, when we plan the script of contents and classes for the following year, so that we manage to achieve all of the objectives and goals of our planning, whether the planning is writing or perhaps just one that is here in our minds, which is where to form people truly capable of loving. And it's very important that we can unite these knowledges, of the Spiritist doctrine with the knowledge of methodologies, theories, and thoughts related to education, development, and learning. Planning is then understanding how people learn. When we manage to make this union, we are able to deliver an efficient, motivating education, which will really create good men, people capable of love. And when we think of a welcoming environment, an environment that welcomes, that makes the people who arrive feel good, we are providing our babies, our children, our teens, and our adults the joy of learning. But then again, how is it possible to create a welcoming environment, a motivating environment, if I don't know exactly those people who are arriving to my class? How am I going to create this welcoming environment for everyone? Are they motivated? How do they learn? What happens inside brain and body for them to develop? This is our proposal, to reflect on how we should create this welcoming environment, this motivating environment. How we are going to do that even if we don't have a knowledge of the whole learning process and how it takes place. That's why it is very important to reflect on each stage of life, on how development and learning occur at each stage of life. What are their interests, what they like, what they are capable of doing, what their abilities are, and so on. This is all so that we can offer tools that favor their involvement. Our brain weighs approximately 3 pounds and uses about 20% of our blood, our oxygen, and our energy. It has over 14 billion neurons circulating at a speed of more than 270 miles per hour. There are millions, billions of simultaneous synapses, which make the brain capable of receiving 10,000 messages at the same time. All our actions, all of our thoughts, and our memory are managed and stored in these neural pathways. Today we understand that every brain is uniquely organized. But this was not the case until some time ago. In the old days, yet not that far, the education provided to students was the same. There was no interest in promoting different ways of learning because it was believed that by passing content in the same way, everybody would learn. There was no notion that each brain is one, and so all was standardized, from the format of the classes to the treatment provided to the students, and the evaluation methods were always the same for everyone. Education did not value students' skills, creativity, or motivation, and then, as a result, students did not engage in learning, and they did not retain long-term memory. Long-term memory is what definitively retains information. This memory is unlimited, and it allows us to relive or recover concepts. It needs to be stimulated so learning can happen. And there are 2 ways to motivate learning: with pleasurable experiences or with painful experiences. As motivating as the lesson might have been prepared by you, If the student is experiencing some kind of pain, whether physical, emotional, or social, that pain will for sure hold that attention longer than the lesson. And no matter what activity is happening in the classroom, if there is suffering in any way, that will be the center of the attention, and the student will not be allowed to focus in what is happening around. As a result, will not be able to learn. To prevent this from happening, we need to ensure that all students feel they are in a safe, risk-free educational environment. It's no use in planning a wonderful class thinking about motivating actions if, by the time of the class, I don't have an attentive look at that student who is there and is not participating. Many times, participation that is not as we expect is seen as indiscipline, as not caring. But it may not be the case. It is usually enough that we have a slightly different look to understand the behavior of that student, whether a young child or an adult, to realize that they need a safer environment in which they might feel comfortable to share. It's very important to discover ways to improve the environment, always remembering that everyone is unique. Each background is unique, and there are countless ways that we can take advantage of to make the environment much more welcoming for everybody, promoting the pleasure of learning. Pleasure is the best way to engage students' brains. Learning needs to be relevant, meaningful, and fun. But let's go back and reflect more on learning in the painful way. If even with all of this motivation, something is not right here or here, nothing will help. And that's why we need to work on both sides at the same time. Have a look at what needs to be corrected and help correct it first, so we can motivate after that. And speaking of education and motivating, pleasurable learning, I'd like to invite you all to a reflection. Ask yourself a question. Would I enjoy sitting and watching my class? Think about the environment, the arrangement of material, furniture, visual resources, interactions between everyone. Would you like to be there as a participant, as a student, to participate in your class? This is a very interesting and important self-reflection. We often expect a response from our children, from our students. But would we be able to be motivated if we were in their shoes? At the same time, it's very important that we remember that every brain is unique. So, many times you might think that, yes, I would enjoy attending my class. But does everyone in your room would have the same perception as you? And the opposite can also be true. Suddenly you touch a lesson and then you self-reflect. I wouldn't want to be in their shoes. But when you see the result, it was a wonderful class for them. This depends a lot on several factors. And that is why we have to keep in mind that the more motivating resources we can find, the better our results will be. So when you prepare your class, it is very important and necessary to offer students several entry points, taking into account their interests, experiences, and knowledge. Each one is one. Everyone likes different things. Everyone has a different skill. This means that the same content needs to be presented in several different ways. In one class, you can develop content by singing a song, offering a moment of Play-Doh or clay, a picture to paint, a puzzle, a board game, a game to stimulate movement like sit, get up, run, look for something, come back. And then you go on, thinking about each of your students, thinking about what each one of them likes, what is more interesting for them as an individual and also as a group. But then I need to think that the same content will need to be worked in several different ways. It takes some time. Of course, it takes time. But it is a time dedicated to the ones that you are dedicated to, your students. So let's do it with love. It is okay to spend a lot of time to ensure that content is learned properly. We don't need to be in a hurry. And with this thought in mind, we can reflect on the real need to make an annual planning with a lot of content. We have the tendency to try and teach the entire Spirits book in 1 or 2 years, which will cause a need to rush classes, leaving the effective learning for second. The recurring thought ends up being that it's okay if they haven't learned everything so well, because then in the next cycle, they will learn again. They will revisit all of the content, the subject, in the youth classes, for example, and later in the adult courses. But that's not how it works, guys. It is well known that the younger brains are much more open for learning. So the sooner the content is learned, the better. But this learning needs to be of quality. It has to be meaningful. It is often preferable for us to take a little longer on the content. That's okay. But then we ensure that it will be learned as it should be. And then, of course, later on, the content will be experienced again, but with the long-term memory. Our students will recover the content, accommodating the new content, which will add a lot to their knowledge. And this thought leads us to conclude that we have the entire period of childhood to teach the Spiritist codification to our children. That we have from 0 to about 10, 11 years old to study the Spirit's book, the Gospel, and the other works. There is more than enough time to complete this content, working in a very smooth way, which leads to achieving the effectiveness in learning. Allan Kardec reminds us of the following. We all have the same beginning, but as we evolve, we develop in different ways, which means there is no point in me wanting to teach the same class to everyone. As Kardec reminds us, each one has its own evolving process. So each one of us will learn and develop in a different way, and each one in its stage of development of evolution. Just because I only have 8-year-olds in my group, it doesn't mean they are all the same. Not at all. When we think about the past lives that each one of us has experienced, each one is in a different evolutionary stage. One might be further up, the other further forward, the other further down, or one next to the other. And everyone is more or less at the same stage of their biological and physical development. But in relation to memory, to intellect, to gifts, each one has their own. When we are going to present new content then, always remembering this reflection of presenting content with tranquility. There is something that needs to be taken into account, always. When content is presented, the brain needs to find a way to accommodate this content with other contents that have been learned previously. This is called cognitive conflict. The cognitive conflict is very important, but can often be cause of frustration. And we as educators, Spiritist educators, tend to protect our children, not allowing them to have these conflicts. Many times, we already have the answer prompt when we realized that the frustration is starting to happen. Let's think, for example, of a toddler who is trying to fit a triangle into a round pot. We know they won't make it, and we get desperate when we notice that the child starts to hit, to kick, to turn to the other side, to turn and turn the thing, and then until there is a moment when they start crying and pouting. Our first impulse is probably to hold their hands and show them that it's not going to work. Some of us may even go further and say, "This won't work. You are not going to make it." And so we take a slightly larger shape or a triangular shape, and then we say, "Here, look, now you can do it. Try again." Are we effectively teaching this child to solve their conflicts? How to resolve these cognitive conflicts that appear in daily life? Another example could be with a teenager who comes to us with a question and asks for our help, for our guidance. Our first impulse may be to tell them the way they should act. You can do this, you can do that, you have 2 ways to go. You can do this that I'm saying. Are we effectively helping this young person to solve this internal conflict? Sure, we act like this with the best intentions that we have, which are usually intentions to protect from frustrations. But it's very important that we allow them to strive to resolve these cognitive conflicts. It will help them grow. In the case of the triangle and the round pot, what can we do? Let's sit together with the child and perhaps share the challenge. This is really hard. I cannot do it. Can you think of something different? Can we try to find some different pot, perhaps some different shape? And then we encourage the search for the resolution of the problem. We help, we guide, and we take care that frustration does not become a bigger obstacle than it should be. Go on offering tools so that this child will discover their own capability of solving. They can do that. It is the development of autonomy. And at what age do we start developing autonomy? Again, the sooner the better. It's in these small attitudes when we don't take a step forward, but put ourselves behind them and let them go, providing all the support they need. This is motivating autonomy. For the teen who comes to us with the need to help with some issue, why not giving back some answers? And what do you think is the most assertive action? What do you think we can do to solve this problem? Do you think that this solution is the best one? Will it work if that happens? What do you think about it? How about we call someone else to talk to? Perhaps calling a friend to participate in the reflection, motivating interaction between the peers can be extremely beneficial. A colleague can bring up arguments that we haven't thought of, and the mediation of the conversation continues on our own, but just as a support for reaching the most appropriate choice. We provide all the tools for them to develop further, to go beyond. And the key to all of this is motivation. It's promoting autonomy, giving the opportunity to make meaningful choices. For the child, for example, who's trying to fit the triangle, we can call another child and invite them to play together. And then suddenly they will discover the solution without us having to interfere. It is the development for the real world through observation and coexistence with the world around, through interaction between peers and with others who are older and much more knowledgeable, motivating curiosity to achieve excellence. If at the time of feeding the piece, we would say it won't work, this is how you do it, I already put an end to the child's curiosity, and the next time they want to play, they would just look at me and wait for the answer, not wanting to make an effort. The teenager who wants to solve a situation, the next conflict will not try to look for inner mechanisms to resolve it, but will seek for our help and wait for the solution. The development of this excellence in autonomy needs to be natural. When we are able to take that step back, to be there just to give the necessary support, providing the freedom to seek within themselves the necessary tools to solve whatever they have to solve. We are helping in the integral formation of the human being. Of course, our attention must be constant, because if the challenge is low and the skill is high, the brain is demotivated, it gets bored, and learning doesn't occur. Or, if the challenge is high and the skill is low, the brain gets stressed, and then learning can be traumatic. We then need to find ways to balance the ability to solve something with the challenge itself. And when we realize the importance of encouraging autonomy, we are following Jesus, who teaches us that providing the fish is important, but that the ideal is to teach how to fish. Always giving ready answers is just providing the fish. It may help at the moment, but as a long-term solution, it will be inefficient, because we will be motivating passivity in people. On the other hand, when there is motivation for reflection, for seeking answers, people learn how to fish and they become autonomous beings, capable of taking care of themselves and of others. Years ago, in the old days, there was the belief that the brain was unique, that everyone learned in the same way, and that learning was passive. What today, in the face of so many contributions from educators, philosophers, and thinkers, that we will study during this course, we understand that this is very different. But even today, through our own experiences, many of us still end up reproducing in our classrooms expository classes in which students, whether children, teens, or adults, they remain passively just listening to the exposed content. Many of us, after presenting the content, end up distributing sheets and asking students to carry out an activity, a paper record, such as a crossword, a painting, or asking them to draw something. Of course, activities like these are of great importance. They are great resources, but it depends on the moment. It depends on how they are used. We will reflect more about this during our classes, during our course. Today we know that active learning with proposals on hands-on, multisensory activities that promote reflection, interactions, and movement greatly favors the complete cognitive, motor, emotional, spiritual, moral, and social development of our students, of our children. Our role as educators is to offer options, to show ways, and to guide the best decisions, to promote self-knowledge and autonomy as well. Further on, for the full development stimulation to be efficient, it is necessary to know the emotions, the intelligences, abilities, and capacities that each being brings within themselves, so that we can offer ways of learning that contemplate all of them and that favors the learning process. Learning is a fundamental process in people's lives. The acquisition of knowledge is what enables the individual to give opinions, to reflect, to make a stand, and make decisions. Knowledge can be acquired in several ways. Through reading a book, interacting with peers, interacting with more knowledgeable people, watching a movie, and so many others. It is a process associated with the development of skills, competences, intelligences, and individual behaviors that are acquired and modified through observations and lived experiences. And learning never stops. Even the brain of adults is able to develop and to learn. The brain keeps developing. It keeps learning. Consequently, we are always developing, improving our skills, our competences, our aptitudes. And that is wonderful. From mommy's belly to adulthood, from conception to disincarnation, we are developing, acquiring new knowledge, improving ourselves. Development and learning go together throughout our existence here on earth. They are the result of our experiences, the environments, and people with whom we interact. They happen from the inside out and from the outside in. It is our duty as educators to study, to seek ways to know how to motivate learning and development in their fullness, to favor the integral formation of the human being. In our groups, we will receive all kinds of skills, aptitudes, and intelligences. We will welcome disabled people, people with different social backgrounds and cultures. And we need to be prepared to welcome everyone equally. And to close this moment, we brought a suggestion to work the theme God in our classrooms. Talking about God is always very good. And for each age group, There is an infinity of ways for this, and also for other subjects of the Spiritist education. Our choice was the opening theme of the Spirit's book questions. One might think it's a rather complex topic to work with babies and toddlers, but it's perfectly possible. We just have to know how to adapt the content. We can motivate children to the ideas of appreciating God's creation, praising God, observing nature, and God's love for all of us. Looking outside the window, observing the sky, and talking about it, its colors, the sun, the clouds, the rain, playing with water. We brought this as a suggestion. We can put animals, flowers, or whatever we want, and we play observing the sensations that this activity provides. We can talk about the characteristics of each animal, each flower, the water, and sing songs, tell stories. Sensory sand is also an excellent option. For older children, making binoculars with decorated toilet paper rolls and go out for field study in the garden, in plant pots, and watching the sky. Observe the elements of nature. And later, this observation can be registered with clay modeling or in a beautiful collage with dry leaves that are found on the ground, reinforcing the idea of never pulling out leaves and petals, but using those that nature has already discarded. For teens and adults, starting with the brainstorming is a way to stimulate reflections. What do I know about God? What concepts does each one have of God? It can be an individual brainstorm, in pairs or a collective, hanging a poster on the wall and favoring the movement of getting up and writing, which is also important for older people. If you work with seniors, a memory game is a way to reflect on God's concepts and stimulate the brain at the same time, favoring the development and well-being of students. We hope this first class has been of great benefit to you. We will continue our reflections through the WhatsApp group, and we are waiting for you in our next class. All classes will be forever available here on our channel for you to share and watch as many times as you wish. Our course continues with some more classes in which we will talk about the education of babies, children, teens, and adults. And if you subscribed, there are a few more surprises in store for you. We just reopened registrations for a few more days. If you haven't signed up yet, rush to the link in the description of this video and guarantee your participation in our group to receive extra materials and other surprises. And spread the word to whoever you think will benefit from these moments. See you in the next class.